What I've done in my experience, outside of loathing myself, which I'm sure we've all done at some point, is to create a lot of rules, a lot of safeguards to protect myself from the shame that comes from not feeling good enough. I would lay down all these rules of like, if I do this and if I do that, then here's my proof that I am actually good enough.
Welcome to Partners in Sublime, where we explore the teachings of depth psychology and Vedic philosophy to achieve the highest levels of personal growth and self actualization. Join me as we tap into the unconscious for intuitive guidance and creative direction. I'm your host, Shagun Chopra. Let's begin.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 12 of Partners in Sublime. Today, we're going to tackle a very fundamental question. Am I really good enough? And we ask ourselves different versions of this question, like, did I respond fast enough? Did I do enough? Did I come across the right way? We are almost always grappling with this question more than we would like to admit. This sense of not being enough is so familiar to us. I don't think we would know what to do with ourselves if we didn't feel that way. We operate from this constant sense of lack, of not being sufficient, of not being able to do as much as we can in every circumstance. And fundamentally, if we look at Alfred Adler's work, this stems from a sense of inferiority, an inferiority complex. Like, we are in this mode where we are comparing ourselves to others and thinking that we're falling short. And we're using that to mean that something is wrong with us, that we must strive and we must try harder and constantly give our 200% to just feel enough. And it's such a moving target. No matter what we do, we don't really get there. At least that's been my experience. So, what is actually going on when we're asking this question of ourselves, either directly or in its many shape shifting forms? Did I do enough? Was I too much? Was I too little? And so on. Brené Brown, one of my favorite authors and speakers, is the researcher for shame and vulnerability. And she calls this constant extra doing the hustle for worthiness. We're constantly trying to do more in order to feel worthy, in order to feel enough. And her hypothesis is that this overdoing, this hustle, is stemming from this chronic, toxic form of shame. So let's talk about shame for a second. In past episodes, I've talked about how every emotion has a purpose. So, just like every other emotion, shame started off just fine. It was meant to serve a purpose. It was meant to warn us that we are about to do something or we have done something that might lead us to get ostracized from the society, which, especially back in the day, was very critical for our survival. You just couldn't have food, have shelter, have community, reproduce, or anything without being accepted in a community. So, of course, the shame signal was very valuable. You paid attention to it and you used it to guide your actions. And now, as humans have developed, our imaginative capacity, our ability to see ourselves, our ability to have that, metacognition, meta awareness is so great and so well developed that none of these things need to actually happen. We can just imagine them as little what ifs, and they start to haunt us as if it was happening in real time. We've talked about how fear does that. In the past, fear was supposed to protect us from being eaten by a mountain lion. But now there is no lion in sight. It activates that evolutionary system that created fear, even when the threat is imaginative. Similarly, shame gets activated even when the threat is imaginative. There is not actual ostracization happening. No one in your family is saying, get up and leave. But there's this idea that it might happen, that it could happen, that we will end up othering ourselves. That's what creates shame when there shouldn't be any. And this shame, it's so insidious. It tells us you are not enough as you are. You must do more to belong. You must do more to justify your presence on earth, your presence in this company, your presence in this family, your presence in this relationship, your presence with your kids. It's always telling you that you're not measuring up. And that's why this question, am I actually good enough, continues to be a question that's underlying a lot of our actions, a lot of our experiences, a lot of our emotions. So I thought it would be valuable to answer it today. Before we answer it, just one quick distinction. Sometimes we get the sense that I am not doing enough because we are not fulfilling our soul's purpose, we're not living our dharma, we're not engaging in the actions that we were born to do. That is one type of need we feel that we could call ambition. And then there's this other need we feel for hustle or other ambition that is purely driven by, I don't feel like I'm enough. And we must learn to distinguish between the two because sometimes we might go from one to the other, all within the same activity, all within the same hour, the same day. When we're doing something because it is our calling, because it is our higher purpose, we actually don't feel any sense of comparison. We don't feel any fear. We don't feel any kind of bodily constriction that we would do if all this was driven by the wants and desires or the agenda of our ego. There is this expansiveness and creativity to when we're doing something because our purpose merits it. Contrasted with when we want to do something because we don't feel like we're good enough, there is a lot of comparison. It's like you're constantly eyeing how you are comparing against others. You are driven by fear, like what would happen if I didn't do this? There's a lot of constriction in your body. And for the purpose of this episode, I am going to assume that we're talking about this latter kind of need to do more. Because the coaching session we will hear and see today is focused on the anxiety that comes from thinking that we're not doing enough. But it doesn't mean that this other ambition is not valuable, this other desire is not valuable, this other longing for more is not valuable, because it truly honors your higher self. And if you feel that you're in that situation, but to focus today's discussion, we are going to stick to the desire to do more, to be more plugged in, to check in as often, to respond quicker. All the stuff that comes from this underlying feeling of, I am not good enough. So let's answer the question now. Am I actually good enough? And the answer is yes, you are. Simply because you exist. The Vedic texts answer this very directly. Aham Brahmasmi. I am whole. Brahman is the Vedic word for universal consciousness that is responsible for the origin of the entire universe, that exists in you and exists in me. Our self is a part of Brahman. And not only is it a part of it, it actually is it. Just like the wave is both part of the ocean and is the ocean, it is made of the same essence. Similarly, we are made of that same essence. And when that essence is so complete that it can construct this whole universe, it is certainly enough to make us feel complete in ourselves. So we are whole. And when we operate from a place of, I don't feel good enough, we have lost touch with this inner sense of wholeness that we all contain, unmistakably contain, undoubtedly contain. But if we simply tell ourselves that, if we simply try to convince us, by reading something or by just knowing this fact that, oh, I am part of the universe, I am divine, I am Brahman, I am as whole can be, we get like an intellectual understanding of it, but we do not get a real experiential understanding of it. And in the moments that we do get that understanding, whether it's facilitated by self contemplation or coaching or just spontaneously, we feel so transformed. We feel as though something is really shifted within us. And that's the kind of knowing we want to get to. And the way to any knowing is by facing our unconscious. We cannot get there by intellectually reasoning with ourselves. We need to get there by genuinely experiencing our higher self that actually does feel enough. So, does that mean that we should not aspire to do anything, to do more, to explore this, to try that? Absolutely not. What we want to do is stay detached from the fruit of those actions. We always take the action and we try to stay as neutral as possible toward the fruit of the action. Thereby, we honor the part of ourselves that wants to do, that wants to create, that wants to move and be in the world, the part that is hopefully coming from your higher self. And we try to quieten the ego that is focused on achievement, that is focused on controlling each and every outcome. That is how we strike the balance between knowing that we are enough and still doing and striving for more in the world. Not because it would make us whole, but because we're already whole and we're honoring what our higher self wants us to do. So, with that universal metaphysical frame in mind, knowing that we are enough, let us start to explore how do we practically deal with this sensation of not feeling good enough. What I've done in my experience, outside of loathing myself, which I'm sure we've all done at some point, is to create a lot of rules, a lot of safeguards to protect myself from the shame that comes from not feeling good enough. I would lay down all these rules of like, if I do this and if I do that and if I do this, then here's my proof that I am actually good enough. And all these rules start out as a genuine expression of our deepest desires. For me, one of that rules was doing yoga. There was a time a few years ago when I lived in Berkeley that I had decided that I will do yoga every weekday morning from 7 to 8. I could do this whether I had to go to work, whether it was COVID time and I was working from home, because that was an hour that was sacred and protected. And I wanted to start my day with a practice I really cared about in a grounded, embodied way. Such noble intention, a true value of mine, if I'm being honest. If this is something I really care about, let's start doing this every day of the week. Initially, it felt really good. I felt that I was quite in alignment with my values. And as time went on, I realized that this had just become a rule. So no matter how I was feeling, no matter what I was doing, I just had to do this practice. And I took it even a step further. I started teaching yoga every morning, Monday through Friday, from 7 to 8 at a studio near my home. So, irrespective of how tired I felt waking up, I would get through my morning routine, get ready, get all my things together, my yoga mat, my laptop, my backpack, everything, go to the studio, teach, take the train, hour commute, go to work, and then would be like the first time that I would catch my breath and rest. So, this value of mine that was true and genuine had become calcified and become a rule. It had been taken over by the ego. And this is a good example of how we cross over from the part of us that doesn't feel good enough because it's not getting to do what it really truly wants to do and what matters to it, versus the part of us that doesn't feel good enough because it is not living up to these rigid standards, rules, and shoulds that we have created inadvertently for it. And the transition from something that was natural and desirable for us to it becoming a performance standard can happen so subtly that we can almost not catch it. We become really tied to the rule and forget the value that was underlying that rule. Another rule I had created was being vegan. I wanted to be more compassionate toward other beings, and I thought that being vegan would be a good way to prove to myself that I was, in fact, that. And then by virtue of doing that, I would be worthy enough for me and for others. And I remember I was invited to a family friend's 1 year old's birthday party. I remember showing up there, and there was nothing vegan. Being there for 4 hours, not eating a single thing because there was nothing vegan to eat. I was hungry, I was tired, I was certainly not enjoying myself the way I would have on a full stomach. And I was not able to partake in the joy of celebrating with the family, eating the cake, and doing all the things that people around me were doing. The rule that has started as a genuine expression of myself had become rigid in combating my not enoughness, that it started to make no sense. I'm trying to be vegan so I can be more compassionate. But I can tell you for a fact, in those 4 hours at the birthday party, I did not show myself an ounce of compassion. I was looking at someone who was tired from the week, who had taken a long train ride to attend that birthday party, who was there for 4 hours and denied myself anything to eat. This is how things that we want to do become things that we should do because we feel so ashamed that if we just did what we wanted to do moment to moment without having to create these rules, then we would not feel good enough. Then that something would be wrong with us. Something would be wrong in honoring our true desires moment to moment. That idea is so terrifying to us that we'd rather create these rules and be imprisoned and bound by them than to operate from a sense of freedom and agency in the world that is driven by a sense of I am whole, I am worthy, I've got nothing to prove to anyone. These rules are just ways in which we prove things to ourselves. One last example before we move on, and this will hopefully really bring home the point. Just like with yoga, I had told myself that it's good to meditate. And I had promised myself that I would go to this meditation center every Sunday. Sometimes I would really cut into our family plans to make sure that I show up at this center. The people would have to drop me and then pick me back up later. But I'd convinced myself that that is what was needed in order to be spiritual and whole. And I showed up even after giving birth, after nights of sleep deprivation and just physical weakness and exhaustion that the body is recuperating from after giving birth. And I remember sitting in the chair thinking, yes, I'm back to my practice, and then just dozing off every few minutes because I just couldn't stay awake for it. That is such a good example of how I did not feel good enough to just be where I was in life, which was a new mother learning the ropes of motherhood for the first time. And I did not honor where I was because I thought that's not enough. I must do XYZ in order to feel enough. And I gave into these rigid requirements that were entirely self created, that were entirely driven by a fear of like, oh, what would happen if I didn't do this, versus a desire, a true desire to meditate. You know, if I just gave myself enough time, that desire would come again, and then I would meditate if and when I was ready for it, versus forcing myself to do it when I was clearly not in a position to. All those examples of rules are pointing to the persona that we are constructing in order to feel like we belong in this world, in order to feel worthy. And every time we construct a persona, the opposite qualities fall into the shadow, they get ostracized from our whole, and it actually further perpetuates the split that was making us feel not enough in the first place. So it might be tempting in the moment to create more rules, to create more aspirations to go after in order to combat this feeling of not enoughness. But the more we do that, the more rigid a persona we create, the more material falls into the shadow, the less of ourselves we have access to. And we actually feel even worse. We feel even less enough after doing that. It is so counterproductive that it is almost mind blowing. Not only are we working super hard to feel like we matter, that we belong, that we are okay as we are, our working hard is actually making the problem worse. We suppress huge parts of ourselves in the shadow, not just the ones that we don't want to show the world, but also our golden parts, the parts that would give us a new lease on life if we were to let them come out. In this cycle we get into, I don't feel enough, let me do more, I did more, I still don't feel good enough. This habitual groove, Vedic tradition calls it samskaras. These are hardened patterns that happen from indulging in them over and over again. They get solidified through repetition and they just become like the grooves in our brain. They get deeper and deeper the more we engage in this loop, and they continue to make our problem worse. And it is through this mechanism that we develop what Jung calls complexes. These grooves get so deepened with time. They take a life of their own. They become autonomous. So even if you were listening to this and you were to tell yourself, oh, I get it. I'm a divine being. I am enough. By doing this process, I am not helping myself. I'm actually hurting myself. Let me stop. Guess what? You won't be able to stop because these grooves are so deep, the samskaras are so strong and developed that this complex of not feeling enough is going to keep taking over and is going to keep making you those things habitually, even if you don't want to. So, then how do we get ourselves out of this mess? We know here that we are and we should be enough, but we can't seem to practice it. Well, that's what today's coaching session is about. You will get to see how exactly to move through this feeling of not being enough and the way it shows up in our life to get to a place of greater wholeness, an experience of wholeness, not just a logical understanding, and use that to fuel ourselves, to fuel that feeling of wholeness, of completeness, of enoughness, and bypass this loop of overdoing, overacting, over controlling, overcompensating entirely. We are going to listen to Tony. Tony works in tech and is about to start a new job. And I was lucky to be able to meet with him when he's at this threshold where something old has ended and something new is about to begin. And even though that job has not started yet, Tony is already starting to see the things that he might do in response to these feelings of not measuring up. This session has a lot to offer, so listen carefully, and I will see you on the other side. Hi, Tony. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for signing up for this. Yeah. What's on your mind? What made you sign up?
Yeah. Well, I'm going through a fairly large career transition right now between companies, and I chose to leave a job at a large company I was really comfortable at for like 7.5 years. And I'm on a trip right now, so I'm kind of relaxed. But on Monday, I'm starting with a new company, and I haven't had a new job like this in a while. Again, 7.5 years, kind of since I graduated from the MBA program, and along with just trying to wipe off and shake off some of the previous company mindset. I'm trying to make sure that I'm as agile and flexible and uh, high energy and just in the right headspace for what's coming next. And that's coming fairly soon. It's Monday, and everything from logistics as to how to get my laptop while I'm traveling to making sure I'm smart sounding on my first couple days to making sure that I'm sustainably set up to do really well are on my mind right now.
Yeah, yeah, big transition. And 7.5 years is like no short time. In that longer time frame, you're kind of right to think that some of your existing or old company, I should say, is culture and way of being may have rubbed off on you. And I think you're trying to decide what to keep, what to leave behind, and what's this new version of you that you want to bring to your next job. Would that be a fair summary?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think part of it is also not just some of the patterns, but some of the comfort that I had. I didn't have to work crazy hard. I'd gotten pretty good at the job. And, whenever you start a new thing, there's new energy required. And I have a almost 2-year old, and I'm just trying to make sure that I can still be somewhat around for the family as well as, make sure I really do show up as fresh and bright and excited for the new role. So part of it's the habits, but part of it also the mental energy.
Yeah, yeah, the very familiar imposter syndrome-ish type of thing where you're like, I was good at my last job, but I I just was familiar with it and now this is new. And how do I sort of keep up with that persona of competence?
Definitely. That's
Even,
exactly right.
yeah, you're like the duck, right? On underneath, you're like trying to like get everything right, managing your 2-year old, and then on the top, you want to make this good first impression. Um, so maybe a good place to start would be the previous company and how you found yourself showing up there. Like if your colleagues had to describe you, what would they say about you?
So I would have answered this question differently if this was a few weeks ago, but because I was leaving, my colleagues said a lot of really nice things about me, which I think it
Hmm.
was a fun insight. Like they, made me feel like I was this really thoughtful person in this role, and people said things like, "Oh, these are big shoes to fill," and they said incredibly nice things about me. I have critical things that I would say about me sometimes, but my colleagues, at least to my face, and as far as I could tell, even on paper, said really nice things about me.
Yeah. So to them, you were very thoughtful, very nice, very competent because they have big shoes to fill now that you've left. Um, what did it take from you to create this image of yourself at the workplace?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'd been there a while, and I think when I first started, and again, this is going to apply to the next place I go. I wanted to go as hard as I could, in terms of my time, in terms of answering someone's email or something, even if it's later in the day, or delivering on something. And I think that was kind of the first year or two, and then I think I had a child again 2 years ago, not quite, and that was kind of like a balancing act where I had to figure out where I could show up, what was really, really important to make it look like I was there for my colleagues when they needed it so that they felt that I was there. But I couldn't be there that many late nights. I had to either leave the office at 4 p.m. if I wanted to see my kid that night, or I had to leave it, after traffic at like 6:30 p.m. and get home. It was an hour commute each way. So I would either leave early and I would see my kid and then I would try and log on, or I would leave really late and just know that I'm not going to see my kid that day. So it was kind of this balancing act the last couple of years.
So I feel like describing this thing you did in two acts. So like act one was like go as hard as you can, burn the midnight oil, reply late to emails, work long hours. And then act two was like more of the balancing time where you on a day to day are making choices that are like, I want to see my kid, I'm going to leave work on time. So there were two internal versions of you that were supporting this one external mask that you wear to show up to work. And it's not a bad thing that you wear a mask. Like we all need a self concept to bring. It's like our, our interface to interact with the world. Like that's what people know to expect when they come to you. So if you're creating the persona of I'm thoughtful and competent, and then initially you did what you needed to do in act one, then you tried to do what you could in act two, but you're trying to sustain that persona as best as you can. Like that's sort of what happens over 7.5 years. Now, in this new company, this one we're gonna do it the other way. So instead of going from external to internal, we go from internal to external. So how would you like to feel on the inside as you do this job?
Yeah, that's something I'm definitely thinking about. It's a new culture too. The culture I'm leaving was very collegial and like it really reduced, I felt, a lot of the internal external friction. There were some things like I would never bring up politics, for example, at work. Like I couldn't bring that internal part to work. But aside from that, there was less internal external friction than I had at a lot of jobs. And part of it also was I was there a while. So, when I go to this new thing, I have to figure out I can't just be me right away, right? I mean, I can, but this understanding who I am internally, I think, and what parts of that internal part to show are something that I'm actively thinking about. Do I want to mention that I have a 2-year-old? I mean, they know, but is that something that I want to mention too much or not? Um, the product requires like a lot of testing, and that also will take kind of extracurricular time. And I need to make sure that I can look like I have that time. And I also have these family responsibilities. So I think trying to figure out how I can look like I'm someone that can be completely dedicated to this role, but also manage that internal family side is definitely something I'm thinking about. So I guess you challenged me to start with the internal, and I don't think I've gotten there yet, but I'm thinking about it. Um,
Yeah. It's really important to make that distinction, even if it's hard for us to figure out the internal. So on the external, the face that you present, you want to come across as someone who's dedicated to the job, which means you're willing to put in that extra time. That is your priority. Like your mind is not cluttered with a million other responsibilities. That's what you believe will help you succeed in this environment, right?
Yeah, and it's not just dedication. There's also this role requires an element of creativity, an element of like social aptitude, which can all kind of umbrella into dedication, but giving yourself space to have those things.
So that's what you want to present. And you also know that it's like required to succeed at that role. And now, do you want to talk about what you'd want to feel like on the inside? Ideal
Yeah.
world scenario. No need to no need to censor yourself in your imagination.
So I'm trying to think about what that means to feel like on the inside. I think one thing I know is how I don't want to feel on the inside. I think frustration and friction are kind of the two things I would want to avoid, at least from an internal side.
So if that's what you want to avoid, what would you like to feel instead?
What does internal mean? Should it be internal work facing or internal home facing when I'm thinking internal?
Um, Great question. Is internal you facing? Like if when you sit down at the end of the day and all is quiet and kids in bed and nobody's asking anything of you, how do you feel on the inside? So, we spend a lot of time trying to make our external life really perfect, but we have an equally rich inner life. And how we feel on the inside is what I'm trying to get at.
Um, I'm really hoping that I can both work harder at my job and be more satisfied in my family time. And I'm hoping I'll just be less tired between the two. The new role is a 20-minute walk from my house, 8-minute bike ride. I'm hoping that I can feel healthier and happier, so that maybe I can also work harder, but I can also family harder, if that makes sense. I like to be engaged in my work, and I would love it if in a non-stressful way, or a positive stressful way, I was thinking about work 3 to 5 nights a week after I had logged off. Um, that's a feeling that I used to get from my work sometime. And to me, it means that I'm really, really engaged. And there's a level of like stress where that could be like, oh, how do I respond to this email? And that's not the type of thinking about work I want to be thinking about. It's how do I solve this particular problem? How would I approach this particular thing I'm working on? But I also want that with harmony. So if that me thinking about work 3 to 5 times a week means that I'm not, helping read to my kid at night, or spending time with my wife, who is also just as important as my kid. I can't just, only focus on my kid. Um, I would be really unhappy about that. I think like the last few months, work got really busy and I was also interviewing, and I like to do things to surprise my wife. I haven't done many fun surprises for her. It's something that's been a part of our relationship for a long time. And um, she's really sacrificed the last few months to try and get me through this kind of intense work period plus interview period. Um, and I'm hoping that I can have harmony for both her and my child, but also getting this little extra engagement to where I want to think about work because I'm excited about it.
Yeah. It's nice that you're, able to spell it out and be intentional about it. Can you share about a time when you were feeling that kind of excited? And it doesn't even have to be job related, but just something you were excited and you wanted to engage in, as opposed to like, oh, I have to work after my kids gone to bed.
I think that can happen in a couple different ways. I think one time I had my own startup. I was doing my MBA, and like I always wanted to be working on it. I worked like 80 hours a week, and there was like this very high ownership and problem solving set. So I think there's that element. But then there's also these like specific tasks that can get me pretty excited. So even at my previous job, it could be like a technical problem where I felt like I was getting a higher level of engagement, testing something, defining something. Um, or there could also be something kind of creative. So I did these demos for, technology demos, and technology demos are oftentimes inherently creative and about storytelling. And thinking about that story before I go to bed is a fun story for me to think about. So I think like that level of engagement can come from either just extreme ownership and pressure, which is okay sometimes, but it can also come from like the type of work that you're doing.
Yeah, love that. Great example. Yeah, you like want to think about it instead of you are pressured to have to think about it. Yeah. And when this was happening, did you have a kid then, or was this in act one of your previous job?
I would say in terms of the fun tasks, I would still get those even in Act Two of the job. And I do think the Act One, Act Two, where I was like more intense and less intense, is actually pretty apt. I think that was a good split that you defined there. I think one of the things that came with Act Two was trying to balance the kid made it hard for me to go a little extra. And then I also felt, and one of the reasons I was looking for a new job was I also was having trouble growing within the role. I had done that same role for like 5 years. And I think people need to be refreshed and renewed in the types of problem sets they're working on as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, with all that context, I hope that was like a good trip down memory lane for you, because that's what you're really bringing, right, to this next job. But you have authorship of your life, like you get to decide how it unfolds. So, the parts that you like, the parts that you want to keep, the parts that took a backseat, like being able to surprise your wife, like, what if all those things could be part of this next life? And I think you have an inkling that they can be and they should be, that you can be happier and be more devoted to family while working hard. Maybe we can try to have you close your eyes and visualize an ideal week at work. A day is hard because days can vary a little bit, but Just see what it's like when you are fully in alignment with the inner values you care about, which is being harmonious, being engaged, being spontaneous in your family life. And you're able to keep this outward persona with minimal friction. You don't have to be with the specifics of what exactly you're doing, just stay with the feeling that it brings in you. And see if you can give that feeling an image or a color or anything symbolic.
Kind of have a feeling um, that I think it's a very summarizing kind of feeling. There's a cadence to the week, and I think when I've had a really intense week in a good way, I'm mentally a little tired, and I'm not so exhausted that I just fall asleep on the couch when I pass out that night. So I think the way I would almost think about it is this feeling on like on Fridays, my wife and I, particularly since having a kid, it's very rare we go out. Sometimes we go out on Saturdays or other times during the week, but Fridays have tended to be kind of this like movie night. Um, and many nights I fall asleep the first moment the movie starts, or I just kind of like we restlessly bounce around between movies. But typically, if I've had a really good week, um, watching a movie does this magic thing where it kind of like pulls my brain away from work or daily stress. And I think I'm thinking about that feeling of like on the couch on the Friday, but not exhausted. And just being able to really engage with a movie with my wife. I think that's like a really, really fun moment for me. That's not, you don't have to go on vacation. You don't have to spend a ton of money to do it. And it's like a kind of semi regular part of a routine. And sometimes that gets ruined by anxiety or exhaustion or other things. And kind of that moment on the couch, watching the movie and being able to be engaged and chill with my wife and maybe eat something tasty while doing it is kind of the feeling I'm thinking about.
It is such a gorgeous image. I mean, I can imagine it now, like, and it might be true for a lot of people too, to have that satisfaction of reaching Friday and having done good things with your week, but
Satisfaction
not
feeling for
losing
sure.
yourself in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Love that. So let's just stay with that image of you and your wife on the couch watching a movie, and it's super fun, and you're not having any of those anxious or overwhelmed or tired sensations, and it's just been the perfect week. So we stick with that image and continue watching yourself or whatever is in that image. I don't know if you know what setting you're in, where you're sitting. Just let that image work on you for a little bit with no agenda. I'll be quiet, and if something comes up or changes, just let me know.
It's interesting. The image is not getting more peaceful as I think about it more.
Hmm. Let it work on you. See what it has to show you.
Yeah. So there's a bit of anxiety that keeps sneaking into the image, which I didn't expect to happen, but that's definitely happening.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
should I speak to what that is or keep sitting with
Yeah,
the
that
image?
anxiety, it sounds like it's asking for your attention.
It's totally
So
asking for my
let's see
attention.
what it have to say.
It's a few different things. So one, the normal things that happen, even if I'm having this really good moment, like these moments are always transient, right? And I'm thinking, okay, if work was really that engaging that week, I might be tempted to check my email on the Friday night. So I'm like, should I be checking my email during this movie time? Maybe I can check it after the movie time, and then do I need to log on in the morning? Is there something on Saturday morning? Saturdays are like I try and protect them my entire life. I've been not my at least since business school. I've worked really hard to like protect my Saturdays, but like every once in a while, like okay, if I need to do it, what does tomorrow look like? And then there's also the elements of like just planning the rest of the weekend that sneak into our minds. Like we have a kiddo. What time are we waking up? Rarely can we wake up past 7:15 in the morning. We have like logistics the next day. and those start sneaking into our both like Friday discussions. So that transient moment of satisfaction where I got like involved in the movie, maybe that lasted 30 minutes or maybe I got through the whole movie, but there's these nagging like, should I check my phone, should we be planning for the rest of the weekend moments that keep bugging me the more I kind of try and peacefully sit in this happy space.
Yeah, yeah. If you were to give this feeling of anxiety a place in your image, uh, what does it look like? I'm still picturing you, your wife, sitting on the couch watching the movie. Where is this lingering anxiety in the image?
I would say it's 70 to 80% in my hand and with the phone. And
Mhm,
then there's a little bit in my brain, especially if my wife asks me a question about the morning. Um, Logistics tend to be just like a very high context thing for my brain to handle sometimes. And if I'm relaxed and someone asks me a logistics question, I can get really cranky about it. So it could come from
mhm,
her, but I think that's probably 10 to 20% of it. And I think around 80% of it's kind of the phone, which is maybe in my hand, maybe the table within hand's reach, but I'm kind of like almost feeling like a physical area
mhm,
of anxiety around it. Yeah.
mhm.
And even if I'm not,
Yeah.
even if there's nothing actually emanating from the phone, even if there's no email, I just need to like make sure I'm checking it or thinking about the next day.
Mhm. Yeah. So I'm imagining your hand going toward the phone as like symbolizing your anxiety. So, th- like I said, and you said, this anxiety is asking for your attention. So we're going to give it. It's showing up for a reason. So keep looking at that image of you wanting to check your phone or the image of your wife turning toward you and asking you a question and just stay with that and see what that brings up.
There's almost this thing triggering in me where like the antidote to anxiety is action. And I'm like, oh, I should just pick up my phone and do it. And then I'm like, wait, pick up my phone and do what? This is just an exercise.
Yeah, you're feeling that physical
I'm like, I
urge
want to grab
to
it.
do something.
Have it here. I'm like, wait, what would I even do with this
Like,
thing right now?
yeah, you don't even have your new
No,
work
I know,
email
right? Like, it's
yet.
like, and it's not just
Yeah,
work. It could
yeah.
like each time we talk about logistics, like we try and add it to the calendar, and it always goes back to the phone, even if it's not work.
I think you're right in saying that the antidote to anxiety is action. And I think that's a pretty accepted view, I would say, even in like the world of psychology. But I think what we're trying to do is go one level deeper and figure out what might happen if you didn't take that action. Like there is some fear that is driving this anxiety. And that's what we're trying to get close to. What are you afraid might happen if you didn't do what you're feeling compelled to do right now?
I think on the home front, there's like a slight guilt because my wife definitely handles more of the home logistics, which takes brain space. And I'll feel like I'm doing even less of my part than I should be. So there's like a slight guilt element. And then there's another element for like work where I'm like, if everyone else is on and engaged and I'm not, there's like a FOMO. There's like, will I have that thoughtful competence, hardworking image that I want people to feel?
Mhm,
So I think on one side, there's a little bit of guilt. I know I'm supported, but I feel guilty. And on the other side, there's like a concern as to like, hey, it's almost like that imposter syndrome. Maybe I'm the imposter if I'm not actually on when others are.
mhm. The anxiety is trying to protect you from appearing less dedicated at work
Correct.
and less of an equal partner at home. That's the
100%.
function
That it very much has that
of that
function.
anxiety.
I would agree
Yeah.
100% with those statements.
And so the anxiety is not going to go away unless it serves its function, which doesn't mean you have to do exactly what it says, which is what you've been doing. You sort of give in to it, right?
Yeah, unless I'm
The
very
anxiety
tired.
happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's a way to consciously engage with it. If that's the function of anxiety, then what might you do to take care of, to the extent that you want to, what the anxiety is trying to tell you, and then the anxiety will go away because it served its function.
Yeah, I have a few tools that I use to manage when stuff like this happens, and they're pretty effective. They do
Mhm.
unfortunately involve the phone, just because I don't like paper and pencil. Um, if it's like a logistics thing or even a work thing, I find writing stuff down is really helpful. So I might start a to-do list for just the morning where I'll write down 3 to 5 things that actually matter to do in the morning. I won't look at the rest of my to-do lists, which are just huge inboxes of messes. I think at least right now, I don't have the self confidence not to check the email. And there'd be times where I'm waiting for someone's response. And like, I'm literally thinking, like, what is this person going to respond? This is going to impact my weekend. Will often be like a senior person, right? And sometimes they'll respond and I'll be like, ah, I don't need to think about this until Monday. Great. Um, and then there might be a situation where I need to think about it sooner. So I don't feel like I have the confidence, especially going into a new role, to like engineer my way around it. I almost feel very tempted to give into the anxiety.
I think it's about taking the smallest action to signal to your psyche that you recognize the anxiety, you know what it has to say, and you're doing something about it so it doesn't go into overdrive. Um, and it's hard for us to answer this question logically sometimes. So if you have the mind space, do one last thing with your image. I know you're sticking with it for a while. There's the ideal image you started with. There's the anxiety of, you wanting to check your phone. Now just focus on you as you're feeling right now, observing this, and ask your inner self to give you a symbol that represents what you need to do to handle this anxiety. Not make it go away, but something that responds to it, something that transcends it, and just wait to see what symbol might emerge.
Yeah, there's a very clear symbol emerging. I didn't expect that to happen.
Share the
I
symbol.
seriously, I keep thinking about pencils.
Pencils.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know. I think it probably has something to do with the write it down action kind of place where my mind was going. But I'm continually thinking about pencils.
What do pencils mean to you? What do they symbolize?
Well, I think they symbolize taking action. And it's interestingly, it's not like a digital pencil icon or something, which I work in tech, so like could have been that. But I think the fact that it's a pencil is also like it's a non-tech way of taking action. Um,
Mm,
so I think that's something I think there's a reason it's a physical pencil that I'm imagining, not, a stylus or a device like pencil or an icon. But I think there's this taking action element and there's this non-tech element as well.
yeah. So your inner self is responding to this anxiety by asking you to look at something that symbolizes action, but in a more old school, analog, low tech way. Um, it also to me symbolizes like somehow I imagine a pencil, I imagine someone sketching something on the pad. Like it almost gives you
Right.
more creative freedom than a
That's
phone can.
much less constrained, yeah, in terms of what you can put down.
Yeah, yeah,
I actually
yeah.
don't like my handwriting. I don't like the act of handwriting, but I do like the act of drawing a lot, which is interesting.
Last time you drew something.
Without AI, it's been a while, uh, but with AI, I don't know, probably like a few weeks.
Well, since your inner self is saying low tech, um, maybe it'd be nice to just bring that element into your life. Doesn't necessarily have to be on Friday evenings, but it could be. But it could be in general too, you know.
So it's actually there's an interesting insight I'm getting. I did it when I started my new job, my last job I did before. I used to keep a physical notebook,
Mm-hmm.
And I work on productivity tools. For some reason, I wanted to use tech all the time, but I'm actually thinking I might bring back a physical notebook element in the new role, just from kind of this reflections that I've been having. I've built quite a system around
Yeah.
digital, but I'm just wondering if there's some element for physical, like daily physical. And I used to doodle in the notebook too. It wasn't all writing.
Yeah. How does it feel to see this pencil emerge and become part of your life in whichever way?
It feels like freeing, but it doesn't feel rebellious. Like I don't feel like I'm rebelling from the status quo or anything, but it feels a little less like I'm tied down to like devices or even work or it feels a little less constrained. And there's
Mhm.
also like this actual
Yeah.
physical tactile sense that I'm feeling with a pencil, like writing on paper. And now I've been switching between pencils and pens in my head since kind of the paper element came in. But there's this kind of tactile feeling where when the ink or the pencil kind of rubs on the paper, you feel like something is being released from you, which you don't really get from digital mediums.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, you can thank your inner self for giving you this symbol and something to work with. And you can come back to the physical space you're in now. Open your eyes, take a deep breath. Okay. So I feel like the way you did it and the way most of us do it when we engage our imagination and if we uncover something, we start to feel a bit free and lighter and we have a little bit more energy. Are you feeling that way?
Yeah, I don't know about lighter, but I definitely feel freer. I have more energy. I have a little more positivity. And I'm like already thinking about, do I have a notebook and pencil that I like? Like I was thinking about my laptop logistics. Now I'm like, do I have a pencil and notebook that I'm excited about for my first day? And I'm not going to give up on digital note taking and all of that stuff, but I just think this pencil and notebook thing is going to be really helpful. I think will really, really be a very prioritized or creative expression. And I'm really liking that concept.
Nice. Love that. I hope you know that this is not just about taking a notebook and pencil, but it's bringing that sentiment to your new job, that sense of being able to just be more free, be more creative, not necessarily feel so tied down. Because what happens is the tools and systems you developed to excel at one place or in one situation, they we can get so attached to them that then there's this other side of us that continues to build up inside that does not find expression. So that side of you is now seeking expression, and you have a wonderful opportunity of this new job where you get to bring that, where you get to maybe doodle your way into work versus doing it the exact way that you've always done it. And it's that openness that's very exciting, very positive, and very freeing.
Yeah, I'm continuing to have a lot of the points of anxiety that I've been thinking about, and I keep thinking about the pencil. And in some way, it doesn't solve everything, but in some way, it does address multiple things, even things we didn't talk about. Like I'm thinking about AI tools, and I should be playing with AI tools right now before starting. And here I am. I'm like
Mhm.
thinking about pencils rather than AI tools. It's like literally the opposite. So um, I still think I got to
Yeah.
do stuff with the AI tools, but it's a fun grounding to. And I was not going to be thinking about pencils and notebooks if we didn't do a session. I was not going to be thinking about kind of grounding elements. So thank you for this.
You're very welcome. No, it's so nice when the inner world speaks and we listen, and it's fun for you and it's fun for me to see what's going on there. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for listening to that session. There is so much to unpack here. I honestly don't even know where to start, but I'll start somewhere. First, I want to highlight the anticipatory nature of this session. It's not as if Tony had started his job and was having trouble balancing things.
there's this anxiety of not getting it right before it has even begun. This is what attests to our imaginative power sharpening and getting more and more honed as we've evolved as human beings. This anticipation of I'm not going to be able to do as well at work and keep up with my responsibilities at home is pointing to something much deeper. It's pointing to the pressure that Tony feels of keeping up with this persona that he's created, both at work and at home, that even though initially was fueled by his values, has now become somewhat rigid. Instead of being able to truly enjoy this break between jobs and being on vacation, there is this sense of like, oh, as soon as Monday comes, I have to be this way. And I have to make sure at work I come across this way. I have to make sure at home I do these things. These shoulds are exactly the rules that we create to keep our feeling of not being good enough and the anxiety that comes from it in check. So, right there is our clue that this is not about problem solving his lifestyle, this is something deeper. This anticipation is reminding me of this T.S. Eliot poem. I think it's called A Love Song. Let me actually get the name. The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. And this whole poem, it's really worth reading if you haven't seen it before, is about a gentleman who's about to go to this social evening. And before he even gets there, he's anticipating all the things that would make him feel not good. And in the poem, all these things are happening in this gentleman's mind, but he never actually goes to the event. There's so many trepidations, there's so many ways in which, he's calculating his moves, he's figuring out what he would do, what he won't do, and if he would measure up, honestly, to the standard that this social evening would entail. So this poem is such a good description of what is happening with Tony. And we've all been there. We've all looked forward to something with great happiness, like it's everything we want, and so much trepidation that we are going to somehow mess this up. So what mess up is Tony afraid of? Over his time at business school and the 7.5 years at this last job, and actually even before that, he has come to create a persona that values being dependable, that values being thoughtful, that values being competent, and he spent a lot of time in keeping that persona up. Even when we spend a lot of time mitigating these deep fears we have that people would see us for the imposter that we are, that we don't actually feel those things on the inside, the harder it is to actually achieve feeling these things. And this is shown in Tony's surprise. When he tells his colleagues that he's about to leave, he's genuinely surprised by how many good things he had to say. 7.5 years at this job, he is thinking, am I being good enough? Am I showing myself the right way? He is putting in so much effort. And to him on the inside, he still doesn't feel like he is worthy of their praise. So when he gets it, he almost can't receive it. That's the pervasiveness of this wound. And you and I, none of us are immune to it. We've all felt, to varying degrees, ways in which we are not going to be accepted. So it's a little bit of a shock to Tony that maybe I'm not as bad as I thought. But very quickly, the internal script starts to run again. And when he anticipates being in the next job, those same imaginative fears and shame starts to show up again. And how does it show up? It shows up as this anxiety to stay plugged in, this anxiety to be on top of things while also not dropping the fatherhood ball, while also not dropping the role of a good spouse. This tension that exists between the presence that Tony wants in his life with his family and his kid. This presence that led him to create a rule that from Friday evening to Saturday night, I'm not going to do any work. This same presence has turned into a rigid rule that Tony now feels pressured by. And even though he's quote unquote not working during that time, his mind is still going toward his email, toward being plugged in, being available on the weekend, between figuring out how much he needs to do for his family and for his work. He has this standard of perfection that he's trying to meet, both at work and at home. He wants to be a dedicated, creative, socially adept colleague at work, and at home he wants to be the husband who shares the mental load, and he wants to be a father to his kid who is present and not missing bedtime. It's taking so much out of him to keep up with these masks that he wears in these situations. I'm not saying that he doesn't want to do these things. This is absolutely his dream job, and he wants to do well at it. He absolutely cares about his wife, and he wants to show up as best as possible in that relationship. And same for his kid. But it's the rigidity that gets associated with these values that turns them to something that we intrinsically want, to these performative measures that we stack ourselves against. At work, this becomes about how quickly I respond to email. Am I available? How much do I talk about my kid? At home it morphs into, oh, I should take charge of our to-do list for the weekend instead of having my wife do it. And similarly for the kid. I should be present at bedtime even if my mind is elsewhere. None of us are stranger to this. Like, as someone with young kids and, someone with young kids and working and with a spouse, I can so relate to what Tony is saying. It's easy to feel like, oh, I'm not doing this. Let's create this rule. Oof, that'll relieve the anxiety of, like, what if I'm not living up to this value? Now I'll just start living up to this rule because it's like easier to follow. And then before you know it, the rule entraps you more and you're even further away from that which you were seeking. You know what we're trying to be when we try to do it all is we're trying to be a hero. Tony's complex is essentially a hero's complex. And the emotion at the core of this complex is his anxiety. That's what keeps the complex in place. And it's this idea of showing up with this heroic energy in all aspects of life, of getting it right. And we all have the idea of what it means to be a hero. It's archetypal, it's in our myth, we know it innately, and we are taking that idea and we're adding our own spin on it. In Tony's case, heroes show up as X, all the things that he listed that he wants to do. And the anxiety is what is keeping this idea, this complex, this cluster alive. So he may tell himself on a Friday night, okay, I worked really hard. It's time to relax with my wife and watch a movie. But this complex will show up unannounced. It's autonomous. He almost can't help it. And it takes over Tony's psyche. In that moment, Tony feels this compulsive urge to reach for his phone, to check his email, to note something down, to just continue to maintain this idea of the hero. Even as we did our guided visualization and imagination, he was feeling this compulsive need to check his phone, even though he hasn't started the job yet and there is no work email on it. That's the power of a complex. We think that we have control on them, but no, they have control on us. You don't have a complex. A complex has you. Tony's complex has him. Whether you call it the anxiety complex, whether you call it the hero complex, the truth is that he's taken this archetypal idea of the hero and has layered it with his ideas of what it means to be a hero in his life. And this complex is causing havoc even before he started his job. And he knows it very well. Look at the precision with which he's able to describe how it shows up. Complexes are very familiar to us, and yet we have no control on them whatsoever. So, what does Tony ultimately do to go past this complex? We can never make our complexes go away, but we can transcend them. We all have what Jung calls the transcendent function that allows us to step above and see what is going on in our psyche. What is this conflict between the conscious and the unconscious? The conscious part of Tony is saying, relax, you worked a good week, enjoy with your wife. And he's holding the image of them watching movie on a Friday night. The unconscious part of him that takes over is saying, look, it's been 30 minutes. It's time to check your phone. It's time to make sure everyone knows that you're engaged, you're dedicated, that you have control on what's going on. And both these parts are represented by different visuals. There's the peaceful act of watching, and then there's the compulsion of checking the phone. And what we all do is when these things arise for us, we distract ourselves. We make ourselves look away, or we give in to the urge, we give in to that unconscious and just get on with our lives. What we want to do instead is hold this tension of the opposites, the need of the conscious mind and this complex, these samskaras of the unconscious mind, and just wait. Literally, we just have to wait. It's very uncomfortable to hold this tension, and it helps when somebody is holding it with you. And to Tony's credit, he stays with it for minutes on end. And eventually, this anxiety complex starts to talk to him and tells that, hey, I exist because I want to protect you from digressing from your values. And instead of seeing as the anxiety to be something to get rid of, you actually get curious about it, you explore it. But the conflict is still there. This is what the anxiety is saying. This is what the conscious mind wants. And you just have to hold that tension. Wait for your higher self to emerge into this transcendent place. When Tony does that, a symbol arises from his higher self. And that symbol is a pencil. He's been spending all this time trying to have control, trying to be productive, has all his tools and things, and is thinking about how he can use AI to get ahead at work, at his next job. And the symbol is so analog in comparison. It's reminding him of a simpler time where he could just draw something on a piece of paper, where he could be spontaneous and he could be creative, and he didn't have all these rigid rules and systems around him. You know, I have to share something here. When this symbol came up, I felt it so vividly for myself too. And it's understandable, you know, we're in the process together. I am connected to Tony in the moment. But even after the session ended, the pencil did not leave my head. And I realized there's a part of me that is really resonating with this and really longing for this. And I saw myself, all of me, in everything that Tony said. As a parent of young kids, and as someone who's had to juggle family, career, and my relationship, I really see what he's trying to do. I've made all those rules, and all those rules have failed me in the past too. And I've felt tempted to resolve my situation by controlling more. So I really do get it. And maybe I'm doing some of that even now. The exercise told me that there was something for me to explore there, because that image of the pencil did not leave my psyche for a long, long time. So finally, I decided to do my own active imagination. I sat with the part of me that really resonated and connected to Tony's experience. I summoned her. She showed up as a younger version of me from maybe 12 years ago. She's wearing these colorful, hippie-ish clothes. She's solo traveling in India. She has a little bag. And there was just so much more aliveness in her. And when I asked her for a symbol, she pulled out this little mirror from her bag, like a small foldable mirror, and she started flashing it onto me. And it was done
in a playful way, in an insistent way almost, like, see me, I'm here. And I was like, yeah, she's right. That part of me has kind of taken a backseat because my life has become so much about getting so many things done, especially with increasing family responsibilities. I noticed in that moment that where she was is a place that I've actually traveled to. One of the places I went to when I used to work really hard in Mumbai as a financial analyst, over long weekends, I would try to make these solo trips to places. And one of the places I went to was Pondicherry. It's a former French colony and an old town in southeast India. And I went there. I remember staying at this Airbnb homes. I remember staying at this place that was really a tree house. Like, you had to climb up to get to it. It was beautiful. It was in the middle of the forest. There was a dirt path, and you could just walk out and you could go to these bakeries and shops. And it was really just this trip with no agenda but to explore. Other than the fact that I was going on a certain day and leaving on a certain day, everything else was quite spontaneous. And I could recognize that this person, this former me that I was seeing in my imagination, was from that time. And she's trying to show me that she's still there. I've just managed to push her in the unconscious. And she was wanting to come out, and she was wanting to be more playful and more spontaneous and remind me that I don't have to rigidly control all aspects of life. Like, the one thing I'm trying to really control right now are my kids' schedules and nap times and whatnot. So it was such a good reminder, and I'm really glad I paid attention to it. Practice what you preach, after all. And I remember that when I went on that trip to Pondicherry, I had actually brought this outfit from one of the shops. It was kind of hippie, but a little bit colorful. And I still had it in my closet. So for this episode, I decided to wear it because it's not enough that we learn about ourselves in our imagination. We must take what we've learned and ritualize it in our daily life so that we feel that we are in this connection with our inner world. So today I decided to bring that younger version of me to the episode. Maybe because of her, it was a bit more peppy and spontaneous. Who knows? You all will tell. But it's really about honoring all parts of us and being whole. And fundamentally, when we feel like we're not enough and we are an imposter, it's because we don't feel whole. It all boils down to the basics, just like we saw with Tony's session. So let's tie it all together and bring it to you. What does all this discussion mean for you? We started with the question of, am I actually good enough? And we ended with how to integrate complexes that are typically fueled by anxiety or shame as a mechanism to get to that sense of enoughness. I think you'd want to look at your life and ask yourself, is there this sense of striving that you feel? First thing you want to do is distinguish it from, like, is it the voice of my higher self and it's directing me towards something? Or is it just masking the feeling that I have that I'm not enough in and of itself as I am without doing anything? And if it's this part, you want to see how it shows up, what form it takes. Are you trying to be a hero or a savior? Are you trying to control everything? What's at the heart of your complex? Are you more anxious? Are you more fear-driven? Or are you depressed that you will never live up to this standard? Getting intimately familiar with this complex is what will start to create the change that you need to truly feel whole. And I'm always here. If you want to reach out and get coached on the show, I'd be more than happy to sit with you, to take a deep dive in your inner world and get to the heart of what's going on in your psyche. Because I want nothing more than for you to feel whole. I feel so much pity and compassion for the part of me that had to create all these rules and shoulds and standards to live by, only
to feel okay. And I don't want that for you. I want you to feel whole as you are without creating these impossible hoops for yourself to jump to. It matters to me, and I would love to hear from you. Okay, that's all I have for today. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you for being my partner in Sublime today. I hope you enjoyed diving into the unconscious with me. To ask a question or get coached on the show, visit shagunchopra.com/ask or click the link below. See you next time.